Okay, well, thank you very much for joining our club meeting, I should say, Vancouver Ancient Coin Club meeting via Zoom. This is the first time we're doing this, and I am very, very happy that we are able to do this, thanks to Julian and Paul Anderson, who provided the financial support to do this. And again, as Julian mentioned, this is the second presentation in the series of Introduction to Ancient Coinage. It comprises 7 presentations. The first one was pre-coinage economies and the development of coinage. Now we're talking about counterfeiting. And then there will be the archaic period, classical period, Hellenistic period, Roman period, and late Roman period in the series. I offered this course to the continuing education departments at UBC and SFU quite a while ago. And so finally I said, I'm about to forget what I taught them, so let's do it one more time, and so that I refresh my memory. In this talk, I'm not going to cover the whole counterfeiting process in ancient coinage, but how counterfeiting impacted the development of coinage. And just to give you a brief idea of my starting point, I think we have an obverse and reverse because of counterfeiters. If it were not them trying to outwit the coin issuing authorities, we wouldn't have coins, and we wouldn't have heads and tails on coins. So this is really a fascinating topic, and I hope you will find it interesting. I just wanted to give you this and just, you know, just to share with you what modern banks do to prevent counterfeiting. And this is a 2,600-year-old process. There was never a gap in this process. The coin issuing authorities, banks, kings, emperors introduced new coins, banknotes, and the counterfeiters simply followed them very, very closely. For those who are not familiar with ancient coinage, I have this slide, but most people here will know what an ancient coinage, what ancient coins are. It's a means of exchange, usually round shape, bearing the official sign or badge of a state, individual, or institute that guarantee the weight and pureness of its metal. This is what makes a piece of metal a coin. Without this, the sign or badge of a state that guarantee the weight and pureness of its metal, it's not a coin. It's maybe a metal, maybe money. You can call it a money, but it's not a coin. So coins that do not deteriorate much, even though they were buried underground for hundreds of years, play an important role in research and understanding of the ancient world. it's an amazing area of study for anyone who is interested in history, and even those who are not interested in history. Many times when I talk about ancient coins and bring up an interesting type to people's attention, I find that they appreciate it, and they feel fascinated by those stories that we see on coins. And therefore, they are considered the miniature libraries of history, and it's not an exaggeration. So what is money? In the ancient world, money was anything that you can exchange with other people. Homer called olive oil liquid gold. It was such a valuable commodity at that time. However, every product was not easy to carry along, and a commodity at hand would not always match what is needed or offered. So they needed to find something to facilitate that. So precious metals, especially gold and silver, were first employed to facilitate commerce. However, it was going to take time to standardize them, to turn them into coinage. But how did that happen? We see a lot of electrum ingots in commerce and in museums, of course, and in various catalogs. And from comparison, we know that they were intentional castings. They were not just coincidental pieces of metal, and they came in certain weight standards that tells us that they were intentionally cast to represent a certain value, intrinsic value of that metal. And from the texture, we can simply see that they were cast in clay, which is a practice, or sand, which is a practice that is still employed in history. And these are all open surface castings. So, yeah. Then we come across blanks prepared for striking. If it is an unstruck flan, the weight is most consistent with 24th stater, as the example here, we know that it is a flan intended for striking. And you see scratches on both sides, indicating circulation. And I asked this question here, defying the blank flan theory. So was it in circulation the way it was? We will never know. And but these scratches simply tell us that it was in circulation for quite a long time. So even though it was not struck as a coin, it continued to circulate as is, which tells us that the intrinsic value was most important in this case, but not the strike or the symbols that we see as a result of strike. There's always this question if these blanks are modern invented ingots. There are, of course, tests to understand if they're old or new, but they're both costly and sophisticated, and most of the time it's not worth going through the trouble. The biggest problem here is that most of these examples are out of context. They were found by whoever, and they are not recorded. And interestingly, they're not extremely rare. They are rare, but there are plenty of them out there in the market and in catalogs, in museums. However, contextual finds are very rare, so we're not in a position to attest to the right or intended use of these blanks. And then all of a sudden we see lumps with a certain mark on one side. This is an interesting example. It was just haphazardly cast into something, clay most likely, without really smoothing or anything. But in a certain way, it's standard, that's for sure. And this one, so is this one, but the clay that they cast the metal in was smoothed somewhat. And interestingly, this one has a single and this one has a double punch mark. And it certainly serves to show the depth of the metal. So what was the reason for that? For quite a while, I'm going back, they simply used these lumps and they didn't have any problem, but all of a sudden something happened and they decided to put a punch mark on the reverse, or on one side, I should say, because we don't know yet if they are reverses or what. They are just trying to do something to prevent something, maybe. And that's the beginning of coinage, I say. From this moment on, coinage is beginning. And right after that, we start seeing some people doing some nasty things. Again, here are 3 examples from the same period, around 650 BC or 680 BC, I don't know. People started to plate the base metal pellets with electrum foil after punching deep into the metal. So the authority decided to punch into the metal to show that the metal is pure inside out. And the counterfeiters simply defied their logic and they punched the base metal first and then plated them with precious metal. Who were the counterfeiters? That's the question we will keep asking. And then the mints decided to put patterns. They wanted to design the punch instead of just a shapeless punch. They decided to put some designs. And as soon as they put designs, counterfeiters simply followed them one step behind. And in this case, in the second example here, they plated a silver core with electrum. So the previous one has a bronze core or a copper core, and this is one with pure metal, but this one was first minted, I will say here, with silver and then plated with electrum. Certainly there was a substantial gain here, and otherwise they wouldn't go through this trouble, because as we will discuss later, it was not an easy process. We just say they plated and base metal with precious metal, but it's not that easy. Mints continue to find ways to distinguish themselves from counterfeiters, and counterfeiters simply follow them one step behind. Here we have the striated type, different ones, one punch mark, two punch marks, and here we have the forays. By the way, foray is a French word for plated coins. Numismatists are interesting people. Somebody starts using a term and everybody follows. It's a plated coin. And then, of course, the most significant development took place when the Libyan kings decided to use their own badge, their own royal symbol, to make their coins acceptable, reputable, so that they can easily circulate. And for the first time, we see a set of denominations with strict rules. The royal badge on the obverse guaranteed the weight and purity of metal, which makes it makes more than just money. First coin, we can say. And counterfeiters forced mints to take further measures to prevent forging. The punch marks also served in this case to push the metal into the obverse die to create an impression. So behind the force behind the invention of coinage here obviously seems to be the efforts of counterfeiters, no one else. They didn't come up with this idea on their own. The Libyan king didn't came up with this. Maybe they came up with the idea of putting his symbol on the obverse, but there was something behind that that forced them to come up with this idea. And it was the forgers. Coin making techniques are experimented and well known right now, but it was something that everyone discovered in the ancient world. You have two dies, obverse and reverse dies, and you put the obverse die, you place it in an anvil, and you prepare your flan, the blank, and attach the reverse die to a punch, and then you strike. And here is an interesting coin from the Roman Republic, showing the coin minting gear. And you know, that really tells you that this is a process that was well known. How well known, it's a different issue. Now I have a video here to share with you. Let's watch this. We tested this with Julian, and he was unable to hear the narrative, but there is a text that follows. So I hope you will be able to understand what they're talking about. Okay, so the process looks quite straightforward, but there are so many variables here that we have to appreciate those variables. So I wanted to share with you the process, how it must have been in the past. And I researched quite a bit and found many articles, researches done on these ancient counterfeits. One is really particularly interesting by Susan Lanice. I guess it is, the name of the article is Silverplating on Copper, Bronze, and Brass. And she provides some cross sections of the coin that she studied. Unfortunately, she doesn't mention the type of coin that she studied. She just provides these scans, and she says copper and silver, and in the middle she finds some substance, and she calls it as solder. So I really don't know when and why they might have used soldering and how it was employed in this case. But this is really interesting. I was unable to read the whole article, but I read another article that mentions this article, and the author of the other article also complains that she doesn't provide much information about the type of the coin and the age and everything. But it is interesting to see that they use different techniques to plate coins, and it was not an easy process. That's to say the least. A lot of things must have been involved in this process. So mining mineral ore or obtaining metal first, building a furnace to smelt ores with coal to reach a certain degree of heat. Weighing smelted metal and cast blanks, you have to do a good job in weighing, because weighing is the most crucial thing here, because you need to match the well-known standard weight, which was not so difficult apparently. Weighing systems were created or invented long before that time. This is really interesting. A latitite orthostat showing probably a merchant holding a small scale, obviously to weigh small items like precious metals. Then, of course, you need to build molds with indentations to cast blanks in certain size and weight, engrave obverse and reverse dies, strike coins to be counterfeited in base metal, plate them with precious metals, and pass them into circulation. It's not a small job. It's a very, very sophisticated process, even though it looks quite doable. I've always suspected that counterfeiters were not ordinary people, and if not, the mint workers themselves. Yet counterfeiters continue to follow official mints one step behind, I say. So the Libyan kings decided to use their symbol on the coins, and the counterfeiters simply followed them. And I say, did they operate in the same workshop? We will never know, other than the fact that we can sometimes see die matches. When we see die matches, which is not so difficult if we can bring the material together, the biggest challenge here is that we either don't have the same material in the same location, at the same location. Say most of these studies are conducted in museums, and you don't always have the pure metal examples and the counterfeited material, and you can only do so much based on the information that you find online. However, I have some examples here to share with you that will intrigue you. So here, Libyan examples, simply plated base bronze base plated with electrum. Of course, you had contemporary imitations, and we should not really confuse them with the counterfeit coins that we're talking about. They're imitations, and as long as their metal pureness is fine, people didn't have any problem. As you see, they survived, they circulated, and people didn't have any problem with them. And then, of course, you have these extremely interesting inscribed coins, sometimes attributed to certain Libyan kings. I certainly don't agree with these Alietes attribution. There's nothing to really indicate that this, whatever they are trying to read here, while wet, it has nothing to do with Alietes, but this is one problem that commercial numismatists have to make their merchandise more valuable or more interesting. They sometimes invent things, but that's another topic. To validate a good coin, they also use banker's marks, or marks that we, numismatists say they are banker's marks. Sometimes you have one, sometimes you have several, and as in this example, you have 14 banker's marks. This is, it's not a game. Maybe each banker or each merchant simply put their mark to before passing it into the next person, just to let everyone know that it was tested each time it circulated, and they thought that would solve the problem, but counterfeiters were just following them very closely. Here is another example with a silver core this time, numerous counter marks along the edges, and it is plated with Electrum. Those who are interested in ancient coinage and the early ancient coinage will recognize these finest series. They are one of the earliest inscribed coins, together with the Libyan inscribed coins. And this one, being different from the Libyan examples, bears a Greek inscription which can be read easily, and it says, I am the sign or badge of fineness, and counterfeiters were following them too. So whenever possible, whatever coin found its way into the market and gain reputation as a pure coin, counterfeiters simply followed them. Here is an interesting example. I found this coin, the one on the top, early during my research, and I said, wow, what a fascinating coin. And then I started to research for the plated coins, and I found this one. Come on. It cannot be a simple counterfeiter following these people. They were in the same mint. It's absolutely mint work. It's not an individual crook following and doing this. They were producing pure coins alongside they were producing counterfeits. And everyone simply was following each other's path. Each mint was following the other mint. And here is a Malaysian example. Here is an uncertain small coin. And here I have an interesting example. And to me, it looks almost the same die. So, of course, the photographs are not always good when you find them online, and it's not really possible to attest to the theory. But this simply tells me that the so-called official mints were also producing counterfeit coins. And why wouldn't they, if they can, of course, survive, if they can pass the forgeries into circulation. Here is swastika like, or sometimes they are called windmill pattern obverse with a very similar reverse. And here is the counterfeit example of the same coin. You name it, any pattern that you come across by any mint was counterfeited by whoever. Here is another example with facing head of a line obverse and a punch reverse. And here is one from Mytilene, Lesbos. It's a fascinating coin, and they came up with a fascinating reverse idea. Instead of a simple punch mark, they simply put the incuse head of calf. It's a fascinating idea and artistically beautiful rendition here, and they plated the same coin later. And then, of course, Croesus initiated gold and silver for the first time as coin metals. And it was a revolutionary step in the spread of coins into metals for the first time. And the crooks simply followed Croesus too. And silver coins, they were simply counterfeited at the same time alongside the gold ones. And now going back, here are two blanks. One intended to be used as a standardized piece of metal. And this tells us that they were counterfeited. I was not able to find an example without any obverse reverse patterns counterfeited. But this example tells me that crooks were following from the beginning, or the mints, whoever issuing these pieces, were simply doing the same thing. And here is a prepared flan, and it's also it has a chisel mark, and they wanted to see if it is real or not. There are apparently some inscriptions regarding the test cuts. This is the longest and the most interesting one, and it's from 375-74 BC. The Athenians simply appointed a dokimastes, or a tester, to sit near the banking tables in the agora. And they were simply chiseling coins for merchants, for people. And if they are good, pure metal coins, they let them circulate. As you see, this one has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 chisel marks, and it continued to circulate. And if it is a bad coin, they would simply destroy it, and they would take it off from the market. And they say that the withdrawn coins were dedicated to the mother of the gods. But I don't know about that. There is unfortunately there is not much evidence about that. However, cast cuts didn't start in 375. Here are some archaic Athenian all examples with cast cuts. So cast cuts were there from the beginning, and it's just that it was legislated by the Athenian authorities and inscribed on stone in 375-724 BC. Since I'm interested in these ancient counterfeits, I tried to collect them. These three examples are in my collection, and I published this in my SNG. I think it's a legitimate item to publish so that people have an idea about these coins. And this one is also in my collection, but this one I found online. But there are many, many of them available online. You can find many of these. So they were detected, they were destroyed, but what happened? Why did they continue to survive? We don't know, but they survived. People simply didn't try to strip off the remaining silver. It was not worth it, or they didn't have the time or the chance to do it. So this is a selected coin. This is a 5th century BC Tarsus stater. This is an Alexander tetradrama. And why did these survive? We don't know, but they did. And quite many of them survived. So you have test cuts, and counterfeiters simply struck the coin and put the test mark on it, and then plated them. And this practice continued all through the time. And this one is really interesting. This one, or both of them, have multiple test cuts. And this one, they did a shallow test cut here and a very, very deep test cut here. Yet, you can see in time the silver wore off, and you can see the bronze core underneath. There are discussions about how these plated coins were produced, and some people believe that they plated a base metal core with a precious metal and then struck, which I don't agree. I believe they struck the base metal coin first, and then they plated them. I have these are two coins that I have in my collection. You don't have these coins in bronze, so they were obviously intended for plating, and it would be difficult to plate an unstruck piece of metal because you use a 5-kilo sledgehammer, and the impact would simply destroy that thin layer of silver or gold or whatever the plating precious metal is. So it was absolutely not striking after plating, but striking the coin in bronze and then plating it. And some of those simply survived. And and they continue circulating from one collector to another. However, there are certain things that we can see that will give out the counterfeits, other than the weight, of course. This is an Athenian tetradrachma, and they're supposed to be around 17.2 grams, 17.25, 17.50, 60, and sometimes towards the end of the 5th century, 420s, 412, they go under 17, and they are 16.5, 16.7, but never under 16.5 when it was struck with pure silver. And these are usually in the range of the counterfeits, or the plated coins are in the range of 14.5 to 15.5 grams. So on each coin, they make around 60 to 70% profit. It's a lot of money in ancient times. And this one is also in my collection. So it's obvious these coins were never minted in bronze. So bronze prepared to be plated with silver. And here, oh, I wanted to talk about this air bubble here. This air bubble simply tells us that this is a plated coin, and it's underweight. No mint, no city-state, no kingdom, no empire was immune to counterfeiting. Just like the COVID-19. It doesn't care where you live and what your nationality is. It finds you, and all the mints, they suffered from the same thing: gold, silver, and other material, and you find them everywhere. So from the beginning, it is there. And no matter how reputable your mint is, you get counterfeits or silver-plated coins. And that's why I theorize that most of these coins, the counterfeit coins, were actually produced in the same mint or in the nearby mint, if not the same mint. But this is a sophisticated process. This cannot be done by simple counterfeiters. You have to know how to make your molds. You have to know how to plate them, and then of course circulating them or passing them into circulation is another issue. Here is Alexander III Philip III type with bronze core, and here is a Roman Republican piece, very well-known piece, and maybe one of the most famous ones would be an 8R Denarius. It was also, they are rare, they are extremely rare, and they sold for ridiculous prices, but counterfeiters simply didn't miss the chance. And then, of course, you have Roman gold coins being counterfeited all along. This one is really interesting, and I found this during my research several years ago. The forger first attempted to make a silver plated coin wanted to forge an Argentus. And then either the same forger or another individual gold-plated the coin in an attempt to pass it off as an Aurelius. Maximianus' first reign. Here is the coin in silver, and here is the coin in gold. And if you look at here on the reverse, you can see the silvering underneath. However, if you look at here, you can see the bronze core. I mean, these people were really talented. Even this serrated edge failed to prevent counterfeiting. I don't believe these were just simple, interesting designs, but at the same time, they were simply counterfeited. And how about the brokerages? Everybody knows that brokerages are, interesting, and they are mint mistakes, right? The minted coin sticks to the punch, and you have the incus of the obverse on the reverse. So they're interesting, we many collectors, many researchers enjoy studying them, but even they were counterfeited. I found this one most interesting. This is the last slide that I will share with you. It's Julius Caesar Denarius from late 46, early 45 BC. It's like a contemporary imitation, but look what they did. They simply used an obverse that you see on a different denarius by the moneyr Plautius Blancus. This is a very well-known coin, and the inscription here, I don't know if it was deliberately shallowed off or it wore out. It certainly passed in the circulation, so it survived. But they simply created a mule. So it's amazing how they were able to, how much thought went into counterfeiting. And this issue is going to continue to fascinate many people in the coming years and decades and centuries, I'm sure. I have here some references for further reading. Some of them are really formative, especially Wayne Salis's Classical Deceptions, Counterfeits, Forgeries, and Reproductions of Ancient Coins is a good read. The others are interesting if you want to research deeper into the science of ancient numismatics. But it's a fascinating topic to research on. Thank you very much for your time. Yeah, and I can take your questions now if you like.
Thank you, Bekircan.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Very interesting.
Thank you, Bekircan.